As returning officer in the leadership election, I can confirm that we have received one valid nomination. Rishi Sunak is therefore elected as leader of the Conservative Party.
So there we have the formal confirmation. As I understand it, the way we can interpret that language, joining me now is Robert Hayward. He's a member of the House of Lords and a member of the Conservative Party. There was only one valid nomination in the end, which suggests that Penny Mordaunt didn't get the 100 MPs backing her.
I think that's probable, but equally she may have taken a judgment that even if she's just got over the margin, Rishi was getting so many extra nominations, really heavyweight nominations left, right and centre, that she probably took the judgment quite sensibly that it would be the appropriate thing to withdraw.
Because this is about unifying the party, getting behind one candidate at a very divisive time.
Yeah, one of her messages has been let's unify the party, and therefore probably the best way of unifying the party was actually withdrawing.
Quite extraordinary how quickly this process played out, but that's actually what your members of your party wanted.
Absolutely, no question about it. I think Graham Brady, as chairman of the 1922, has been exemplary in this process, and it's worked well for the party. The bar has been set pretty low, but the party is much more united than it was at the start of the weekend.
What was the appeal for Rishi Sunak? Because he was a very divisive figure, because he took on Boris Johnson. Many people blame him for bringing down Boris Johnson ultimately. What was it ultimately that appealed to him this time round that didn't appeal just a couple of months ago?
I think he was proved right syndrome, in that throughout the hustings he was spending his time saying this economic plan won't work for the following reasons, and the markets confirmed his judgment. So he was saying he was Chancellor, his judgment was right, and he's now going to be Prime Minister. And can I just throw in that it is highly significant that this is the first Prime Minister from an ethnic minority. The message that sends to a worldwide audience, to your audience, is really highly significant.
At the same time, he's very much seen as a figure of the establishment, though, isn't he? He went to a prestigious private school, he went to Oxford and Stanford, and he worked at Goldman Sachs, and he's seen as out of touch because he's so wealthy. Richer than the king was one of their headlines over the weekend.
It's the indication of what we regard as the American dream. He's actually living the British dream. His parents came here from East Africa, from a Punjabi family, and the whole family, and particularly Rishi, has made a complete success. And can I speak personally, because I have a very, very close friend who is himself half Indian, Hindi, absolutely overjoyed at this moment that his community and the non-white community is reflected in society at its absolute peak.
It certainly is a historic moment, isn't it, Bianca? Not just who's been appointed, what he represents, but also the amount of prime ministers we've had, third in a year.
Truly historic. I mean, if we look at the trajectory, I was just saying to my producer, we had David Cameron as Prime Minister for 6 years, we had Theresa May as Prime Minister for 3 years, we had Boris Johnson as Prime Minister for 2.5 years, then Liz Truss as Prime Minister for 6 weeks. So Rishi Sunak will obviously be hoping to stop that trajectory in its tracks and have a longer stint in the building behind me. But I completely agree with your guess. It is a truly historic moment to have the first ethnic minority Prime Minister, the first person of colour, the first Hindu Prime Minister. It's actually Diwali today in the way that that's worked out poetically for the Indian community here in the United Kingdom. But also I was speaking to an MP just then who was saying to me that he seems the right man to address this crisis. This is fundamentally an economic crisis that the country is facing. He has experience as Chief Secretary to the Treasury and of course Chancellor through a very turbulent and difficult period in the country's history, the pandemic. So he is considered a safe pair of hands. He's considered to be a very intelligent person. He also has been prepared to subject himself to more media scrutiny than the other candidates and contenders that he faced off against over the last few months, and the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So I wonder if we can expect a slight change in the way that he interacts with the media and communicates. But Max, what Sunak does have in red flashing lights is some manual on what not to do as a Conservative Prime Minister. Because if we look at the last two, the downfall of Boris Johnson, many would argue, was hubris, projecting this narrative that it's one rule for those who make them and another for the country at large. And that was ultimately the most toxic element of his premiership at the end. And then when it comes to Liz Truss, she was a weak communicator and didn't give the markets enough advance notice of her bold plans that deviated from the status quo. Rishi Sunak, I'm told, will be sticking more to the mandate upon which the Conservative Party were elected back in 2019, and I'm sure those mistakes that have been made by his predecessors and ultimately led to their demise will be in front of his thinking. He'll be considering how he can unite the party, reshape the Conservatives, restore trust, confidence, and try and give them a bit of boost in the polls, where they're of course lagging considerably behind the opposition party.
Sorry?
In terms of what happens now, so what would you expect? We need to hear from Rishi Sunak, don't we? We want to hear what his plans are. Normally, the following day, we'd expect the elected Prime Minister to head to the palace and meet the King. But because everything's been moved around and sped up this time around, could it all happen today? Could it be appointed Prime Minister today, do you think? I mean, there's no great formality involved, is there? It's just a visit to the King.
That's correct, and there is an element of uncertainty here, and we're not entirely sure of the protocol because, of course, we've just heard that Penny Mordaunt's conceded, which has expedited an already truncated and sped up leadership contest. I've heard earlier that it is perfectly possible that he will be appointed leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister today. The mechanics of that, whether or not that will actually eventuate, we'll wait to hear probably from the 22 committee, from Downing Street or from Sunak's team. But first we'll have him giving the speech to his party in around 15 minutes time. And that will be the first moment for those within his party to start to, frankly, judge him and test him to see if he has the right stuff, because again, this will be no honeymoon period, just like with Liz Truss, and he has quite a considerable chunk of the party who were supporting the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. They don't necessarily have the best relationship with Sunak and his camp. It's his opportunity to show that he does want to be the unity candidate. I've heard from MPs that I've spoken to over the weekend that Sunak has made an effort to reach out to those who he isn't usually associated with, sometimes doesn't agree with, to try and have a fresh start and establish the fact that he doesn't want factions, that he wants to choose the people, his camp say, that are best for the role, and not because he's made backroom deals or made promises during this very short and unusual leadership campaign, Max.
Okay, Robert Hayward, so he will be going to the party, presumably, addressing the party first of all?
I would expect him to. I've not heard the formal announcement, but I would expect him to speak to the party. As you said, he's got to go and speak to the King as well. But I'm sure that...
Could it be today, the appointment today?
It could be. Depends on the question of the position of the King in terms of availability processes, etc.
Yeah.
I was involved in John Major's leadership campaign and present in number 11 when Buckingham Palace rang to say, you know, let's fix up the time, let's make the formal arrangements. But it is although it's a brief process, it's a very formal process.
Yes, I didn't mean this. And when I said there wasn't lots of formality, there's not a lot of complication to it. They just have to agree to meet.
Absolutely, but they have to agree to meet. We don't know what the King's current diary looks like, so it's a brief process. But yes, it will be, I'm pretty sure it will be very, very quick.
On this question of uniting the party, I mean, there are parts of Boris Johnson's camp who hate Rishi Sunak. How is he going to build those bridges? Was it a big deal today, people like Priti Patel, to come out in support of Rishi Sunak?
I think people like Priti Patel and Ian Duncan Smith and other people from the right wing of the party, that is significant. That was the bridge building. The fact that the ERG couldn't agree on who they should support shows that there are some people who are still not happy, but overwhelmingly it looks as if the party is much more united than it was on Friday, although that's a pretty low bar. So progress, but not all the way there yet.